Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Munching with Michael, part 2 of our series on sourdough. Today is going to be sourdough bagels. So I'm going to start out with a KitchenAid, but you can absolutely do this by hand. But you do not want to use a KitchenAid for the entire kneading process because it is a very dense dough. So we're going to start out with a recipe that should look like this. So we're going to start out with making a slurry. This is going to make it easier for us to mix everything into our final dough. So we have the water, the sugar, the salt, and the malt syrup, which I actually had to find at a brewing shop. And lastly, the malt powder, which I found online. We're going to mix until it's incorporated and save this for the mix of the dough. We're going to zero out our scale and add bread flour. To the flour, we're going to add the sourdough starter. Make sure it is active and ready to go, well fed. A little bit too much there. The slurry is being added right now. Making sure I get every last drop. And lastly, the rest of the water. So we started out with 50 grams in the slurry, and this is the 422 grams that are left over. All right, we're going to put this into our KitchenAid, lock it in, put the dough hook on, and once again, we're just going to bring this together, make sure everything's mixed in, and then we're going to knead by hand. But it's a lot easier and a lot less messy to do this with a KitchenAid or any kind of mixer. So you can see stuff coming up on the edges. I'm just going to scrape it down. Mix it again. Scrape it down. Last mix. And everything looks pretty good after this. So I'm going to put out the dough on the board. And I'm going to knead it. Get some slap and folds in there if you know what that is. You kind of slap it and fold it over. Otherwise, you can just knead it like pasta, like I'm doing right here. This should take about 8 to 10 minutes total. So after it's all done, you can see it went from a shaggy mass to a smooth ball that's kind of elastic and it can hold its shape. So I'm going to stick it in a fermentation vessel after tightening it up a little bit. And there it's going to sit for an hour and a half and ferment. After an hour and a half, I'm going to take it out and do what is called a stretch and fold. So I'm going to fold it over into thirds, flip it around 90 degrees, and then fold it over in thirds the other way. And then back it goes into the vessel for 2 hours. So fermentation is done, and we're going to move to portioning them out. So every portion is going to be 125 grams, and I should be able to get about 12 portions out of our recipe. After portioning them out, we're going to roll them into small balls. So now I'm going to take the balls and roll them into logs, just kind of pushing outwards from the middle until I get a long kind of oval shape. You can see me pushing out for each one. And now we take the long logs and push them out even further, one more step, until they're long tubes. You can see pushing outwards from the middle, this time using 2 hands, until we get a long shape like that. So now I can take the long tubes, fold them over my hand like that. And there I have a bagel shape. So we'll see it again. Long tube turns into even a little bit longer. Fold it over your hand and using that crease, pushing down on that, rolling that until you get your bagel shape. So you can see a couple more times, rolling it out until it's nice and long, putting it over your hand, and folding that crease down until it makes a complete circle. Once you get the hang of it, it becomes pretty easy. So the last step is to cover them and let them proof. So I'm just going to throw some ramekins on so that my bags do not touch the bagels. Cover with 2 bags because this is all I could find. And on the counter for 2 hours while they proof. And then after that, we're going to throw them in the fridge to retard overnight. It is the next morning. 1 hour before we want to start the boil and bake, we're going to take off the bags and throw it back in the fridge. This will help develop a skin, so that goes in for 1 hour. When that hour is done, we're going to take our bagels out and set up our station. The station is going to have a large pot that's wide, so it's easy to scoop out our bagels. Fill that halfway with water. And in that, we're going to add a little bit of the malt syrup. Some people think that this helps get a shiny finish to your bagels. Some people think it doesn't matter. I am preheating my oven to 475. And in the oven, I'm going to have a few cast irons. This is going to give me a place to steam as well as keep the heat up during baking. So the water's boiling, and as you can see, I have a wire rack right next to the water so that I can put in the bagels after they're done with the boil. The bagels go in, and we're going to cook 40 seconds on each side. You can see after they're cooked on one side that they're gelatinized, and this is what gives them that distinct bagel look and chew. After they're done cooking on both sides, we're going to take them out and let them dry off a little bit, and we're going to repeat the process until we are all done with our bagels. This is when, if you have seasonings, you're going to want to add them. I'm doing 8 with everything seasoning and going to leave 4 for my lovely wife, plain. So you can see that the bagels are ready to go into the oven at 475. So into they go, and we're going to need to add steam. So on the bottom, we have the cast irons. I'm going to pull them out and add a small cup of ice water. This will slowly melt, creating a steamy environment for the bagels to cook in for the first 10 minutes. After the first 10 minutes, we're going to take away the steam by simply removing the cast iron that had the water in it. And they go back in for another 5 minutes at 475. And then lower it down to 450 for another 5 minutes for 20 minutes total. I'm going to check on them. Not quite done. So back in they go for another 2 minutes. And now they look good. So a total of 22 minutes. And our bagels are done. We are almost done. Just one more step before we finally get to eat, and that is put our bagels on a wire rack so that they cool properly. When they are all cooled, we are going to cut them open and see how we did. Little blisters are a good thing, but I am pretty happy about the crumb. After all that hard work, of course, our last step will be to put on a thick layer of cream cheese. So there we have it, a sourdough bagel. I think it turned out pretty good. Got some blisters, maybe not the height I was hoping for, but overall I'm pretty happy. If you have any ideas for what we could do for future sourdough Saturday, feel free to leave the comments down below. Otherwise, keep eating good.